Of working with Multiform. It's just been a day. Um, for those of you who don't know, I'm Kezidrith, and I'm working through the with problems from the Hero game system, RPG game system. It's a point buy system. I use fifth edition of the system, and today I'm going to finish up talking about a character that is made using the power Multiform. In this case, this character uses the power itself is pretty self-explanatory. The character has more than one form. This is for characters such as Shazam, where you have a 10-year-old normal form, and then the mighty superhero as a second form. Or even the Hulk could be used, created. That type of character could be used, created with this power, as you have the normal Bruce Banner, and then the mighty hero of the Hulk, or monster. I don't know you'd call him a hero or not, but you get the point. The idea is that the character has uh, one or two or more specific forms that they can go into. So the first part of this video was going into using the Hero Designer software to change your rule set, and then to make up the first of the two forms that I was going to make up with this multiform power. I ran out of a little bit of gas working on the first character, so I'm going to bring him up first. But and I say character because essentially that's what you're doing with multiform, is you're making up a full character for each form, and we'll get into that more as we go along. So going back to the first character, I named him Jimmy Smith. His hero ID is the Olympian. This is for a four-color superhero campaign. The four-color being, not the golden age, no swearing, but very minimal swearing. Good guys are good guys, bad guys are bad guys. The whole four-color comic book type setting and scenario and genre. So then we go into the background, and I made him a little shorter than normal in this form. And then his characteristics, which it always bears mentioning that for these top characteristics, from strength down here to comeliness, uh, um, these are base characteristics, and they have normal human maxima. If you were a normal human, would be 20, and then below comeliness here, PD, ED, speed, recovery, endurance, and stun. These are all figured characteristics. They are in some way calculated or figured from what the value of your base characteristic is. So, except for intelligence and ego, this character is pretty much normal human, but I decided to go ahead and raise his intelligence and ego because given he has a hyper intelligent super form, and they share memories, it seemed reasonable that even the normal true form would have some of those powers, some of those mental capabilities. Now, some changes I made from the first video on this. I added a few more skills, and I raised a few of them. Like, since he's in his normal form here as a reporter, I added some to his conversation skill. Bottom line, I added 3 levels to it to give him a 15 or less roll. That's on 3 die 6. In this system, you roll 3 die 6 and try to get under the skill level. So in this case, for his conversation skill, he has a 15 or less. Throw 3 die 6. You're trying to get 15 or under. So I added some things like that to the character, as well as changing some from familiarities, which is like disguise here. 1 point gets you a familiarity with the skill, which gives you an 8 or less roll. You're familiar with it, but you're not good at it. So that sort of thing. On the perks, I also added him 4 fairly buff contacts. In particular, I put the mayor of the city that he's in, and I'll edit that so you can see how a contact is written up. But basically, it's the mayor of his contacts of his base city. And in this form, he has the contact. The contact has access to major institutions. If he's the mayor, he can access fire department, police department, so forth. Uh, Contact has significant contacts of his own. You don't get to be mayor without a significant number of important contacts of your own. And the character, the PC, the character in this case, has a good relationship with this contact. And because the contact is part of an organization, the city government, you have to put a times 3 multiplier on that cost, which would normally be 12 points, which would normally be 4 points for this contact, but because he's an organizational contact, that multiplies it by 3 to give you 12 total points for that. Um, Kind of like here, just a police officer was more. Well, that has to do with the fact that has a very good relationship with this police officer, and other than that, it's the same things. He also has a better role to meet the contact, to be able to get in touch with the contact, than he did with the mayor, which was an 8 or less. With this police officer, it's 15 or less. So yes, a low-level contact can actually cost you more character points because you have better access to them or a better relationship with them or something to that effect. So I added some contacts like this. I even showed some of my geekiness in that this lab contact at the forensics lab that he has, remember he's a reporter, is Harold Ramis. Uh, Rest in peace, Harold. You were a funny guy and a great writer, a great screenwriter. So anyway, and I think that was pretty much it. Oh yes, I added some bleed over from his superhero form, not just the intelligence and the intelligence and ego, but I gave him 1 point of damage resistance. Now this goes back over here to your PD and ED, physical defense and energy defense. They do not have to be the same number, by the way, but in this case they're both 5. Physical defense is used against things like a punch or bullet or a baseball bat, whereas energy defense is used against things like heat or cold or light, a laser or something like that, electricity. And what this normally you have 2 different types of PD and ED. One is normal defense, one is resistant defense. And so what damage resistant does is it takes one of your normal, in this case 1 point of your normal ED and PD, and turns them into resistant defense. And the difference being is just as there's 2 types of hit points in champions in hero system, there are 2 types of attacks. There are normal attacks, which the total of the dice represents the amount of stun damage it does, and killing attacks, where the total of the dice represent the amount of body damage it does. So, bluntly, normal attacks are trying to knock you out generally, and doesn't mean they can't kill you. And killing attacks are just that, they are designed to kill. The other difference is that with a killing attack, if you have no resistant defense, you have no defense. Alright? That bears repeating. If the attack coming in is a killing attack, if you have no resistant defense, no damage resistance, then you are defenseless. Normally, against a normal attack, this 5 points of PD or ED would be subtracted from the total of the dice, and there you go. If you had no resistant defense and it was a killing attack, you would subtract nothing from the dice. You would just basically take that much body damage. Okay? With resistant defense, any of your defenses that are resistant, you subtract from a killing attack. So in this case, it's only 1 point, but that means he's not totally defenseless against such an attack. Now, in a 4-color campaign, generally speaking, even the bad guys are not going to be using killing attacks. That's something that it's kind of hard to get through new players' thinking, is that when you're in a superhero genre, especially 4-color, generally speaking, the goal is not to kill the bad guy or to kill anyone for that matter. In fact, in these types of comics, a common psychological limitation is code against killing. So you got to keep things like that in mind because, a lot of players, they really do. They want to go gung-ho and straight for the killing attack. That's not really a good idea. This isn't some of those other games and some of those other genres where your goal is actually to put the opponent out of commission permanently. Alright, so those were done. I also added some disadvantages to this normal character, in particular two DNPCs, dependent NPC characters. That's redundant, isn't it? NPC stands for non-player character, so NPC characters is kind of redundant. Anyway, um, one is his wife, Angelica Smith, who in my head I'm kind of sitting here going, she's a race car driver. So that may, if I were actually intending to play this character, I would probably actually have done that. And then Jillian Richards, who is his camera person. He's a reporter, so he's out on the field, and Jillian is usually the one who brings the cameras and drives the van to get him to the scene of his report. Psychological limitations, he's overconfident. It's only common and moderate, so he can choose not to be, but in general, he's confident about himself and his abilities. He also comes from knowing you've got a, backup of a huge muscular form that you can fall back on if you need to. And of course, he's a report. He has a sense of honor and duty. That means he's upright, he's forthright, he's going to tell the truth and when he can and things like that. But he's always nosy and looking for his next big story too. So he's always sticking his nose in there, and that gives him a reputation. That reporter. If you remember over here on Perks, he does have a good reputation for being, he's that reporter. I did that specifically to point out that you can have a bad reputation for being the same thing. In this case, the bad part would be that people want to turn him aside and shove him out of the way. He's that nosy reporter, good for nothing. So keep that in mind. And he also has a social limitation of a secret ID. Nobody knows he's also the Olympian. So, these are the things I added to the character. If you notice, I could have added some more disadvantages, but all characters with multiform have to start with the same base points as the true form. So I wanted that 200 point base points for his second form, the Olympian. And so I had to use that many, but I also needed some disadvantages on him to flesh him out as a character. So he's built on 295 points. A lot of it went into these contacts and the power of multiform. And so now we're ready to progress with this character into making the other form, the Olympian. So to do that, we first come here, like usual, we start a new character, Hero 5th Edition, and Superheroic. And we're going to go ahead and name him. He's the Olympian. Yes, I like saying it that way. Sorry. And he's got the alternate ID of Jimmy Smith for color superhero. And I'll put myself for right now as the game master. Alright, now, I took notes this time. So, I want to start out with characteristics. And I'm going to start with a base of what I have in his true form, his other form. And so I'm going to put all of those, oops, that's the wrong one, all of those attribute scores in here as his base that we're going to be working from as the Olympian. Nope, not PD. Comeliness. Make him look a little good. And so forth. And so on. Alright, I'm almost there. Just give me a second more. We're just, basically, I'm setting up his normal form as being his base to start from. So now I'll switch sheets because I've already worked up the Olympian. And so we're going to start out. I always like starting out with disadvantages. Why? Because you have 150 points of disadvantages you can take, but you don't have to take them. So that needs to be kept in mind. You don't have to take these points. So sometimes you just run out of ideas of, you know, what to put on there. But these characters, another thing to keep in mind about Multiform is they are distinct and unique characters. So if you have something like a skill or disadvantage that's only on one, and you don't put it on the other form, they are completely distinct. Okay? So with that in mind, since they do share memories, I want to put both of the DNPCs on both characters. So both of them are normal. Angelica Smith. Both are unaware of the character's adventuring superhero career. And so that's Angelica. And the other one is a little more likely to get in trouble. And this is Jillian. What was the first name? Or the last name, I should say, Richards. Yes, I have a poor memory. And this one is also unaware of the adventuring career. So those are the two DNPCs. I want them to be in both forms. They don't have to be, so keep that in mind when you're doing these multiforms. If you don't put them together, no matter how much sense it makes that it be on both, it won't be. Alright, so DNPCs, I'm going to give him an enraged. I will get into what an enraged is in just a second. 11 or less to go enraged. Situation is uncommon. And the circumstance is when DNPC harmed. And DNPC is harmed. Body. Okay. So what this means is enraged is a form of berserk. Or berserk is a form of enraged. The circumstance is uncommon. His DNPCs may get into trouble a lot, but they really shouldn't come under fire from the people that are after somebody like the Olympian. So it's an uncommon circumstance that they would take harm, even though they do get into trouble quite a lot, especially Jillian. Now you roll 3 dice 6 when the situation happens. So let's say one of his DNPCs does take body damage. Well, in that case, he throws 3 dice 6. If it comes up on the total of it as 11 or less, he is now enraged. What that means is he will immediately stop everything else he's doing and attack at full power whoever set the enraged in motion. So in other words, whoever hurt his DNPCs is now about to get hurt. Okay? To the exclusion of everything else, he will now attack that individual if he failed on his become enraged and roll. Okay? Now, after that target is down, if he manages to put him down, you roll 3 dice 6 and try to get under 14 to recover. Okay? If he recovers, all's well and good. He can go back under, do what he was supposed to be doing in the first place. If the roll fails, though, at an enraged level, he now attacks the nearest enemy. Okay? So, he attacks the target that triggered the enraged. After that one's dealt with, he now attacks the nearest enemy available. If there are no enemies available, now he starts nearest available target. Okay? Which could be friends. This is why it's a disadvantage. You are putting yourself in a situation where you could end up attacking your friends. Okay? This is at the enraged level. If you add the 10 points and put it at the berserk level, then after you deal with the target that set you off, it's immediately nearest available target. In other words, it is much more likely that you will now attack a friend or an innocent civilian. So generally speaking, berserks are not a good disadvantage for a hero. Enraged are kind of skirting against the line. You could get yourself in a lot of trouble with these sorts of things. So, with that in mind, we're still going to put the enraged there. You know, no offense, your wife or your little weak and squishy camera person gets bloodied, you're not going to be happy, and off you go, right? All right. So there are other disadvantages. We could put a hunted on him. He's tangled with somebody or a group or an organization before. I didn't do that, but I did put on some psychological limitations, which include, again, the overconfidence. Oops, I hit caps lock. Okay, but with the Olympian here, it's common, strong. Now, on this intensity, there are three different intensities. There's moderate, which should flavor your attitude. So on Jimmy Smith's persona, the overconfidence was common but moderate. So he is inclined to think a little much of his abilities and everything, but in the end, it just flavors his attitudes and his actions. It doesn't. He can stop and go. Maybe I shouldn't do that. He's able to. At the strong level, you have to make an ego roll. In other words, you have to succeed at an ego roll to resist the temptation to follow this behavior. Okay? And finally, at total level, you can't avoid it. Okay? You are overconfident to the point that you are going to barrel into a group of 30 people that have guns can take you down. You're going to do it anyway. So, generally speaking, a total psychological limitation, not all the time, but many times, is not a good thing for a superhero to have. So we're just going to make it strong. He's a bit certain of himself and his muscles and everything. Okay, sense of honor and duty. We're going to keep that one there. So what did I put it as? Common strong again. Okay, now some GMs will have you, and in fact, I'm one of those some GMs, would have you give at least a note of what this type of thing means. What is your sense of honor? What does it entail? And things like that. I want to know these things, basically, so I can put you in situations that will make you push up against it. Are you going to, if you constantly announce your presence, but this supervillain is going to lay waste to you and the area around you, are you going to do that sneak attack? Or are you going to follow your sense of honor? And so we like things like that. And so keep that in mind, because this system is also notorious for mentioning that a disadvantage that doesn't put you at a disadvantage isn't worth any points. So something like thinking the color of things that are purple are alive, that isn't going to get you any disadvantage points, because when does that come up? Really? So no, your disadvantages have to have some teeth to them. So here's another one, aggressive in combat. What that one means is, if you are aggressive in combat, you will attack. You will go all out. You're not going to you're going to aggressively try to put down your opponent so that you can move on to another one. It's not quite the enraged, because you are still in complete control. You can plan, you can use tactics, you can work without teamwork with your partners, your teammates. It just means that you're only going to pull your punch enough so that you don't smear and paste the guy that you're fighting with. You're going to try to drop them as quickly as you can and put them out of action. So that's aggressive in combat. Okay, and devoted to justice. Here's one of the times where a total psychological limitation comes in for a hero. So, devoted to justice. You're out to bring about the most justice, the most good for the most people possible in the world. All right? And finally, Cyclim. common moderate. And this one is disillusioned when the world isn't black and white. In other words, the character gets a little down when he finds out that things are a shade of gray, that people don't, good guys aren't always good guys, bad guys aren't always bad guys, that the mayor maybe did take a little bit of a bribe because, he needed to or something, he's going to be disappointed when these such things are pushed into his face. So that's another cyclim. And then I put on him 2 social limitations. Both of them I think are frequently minor. No, one's frequently major, one's frequently minor. So frequently means you can roll 3d6 in 11 or less. The GM rolls 11 or less on it. This pops up. But the minor inconvenience is that he's a celebrity. The Olympian is known. He is, people will try to get selfies with him. People will try to get in the way, and video instead of clearing out of the area. And the other thing is, of course, from his alternate identity, nobody knows that the Olympian is also the reporter Jim Smith. All right, and so finally, to round out 150 points, and apparently I messed up somewhere, and I'll have to check on those. I gave you 1 die of unluck. Oh, okay, there's the other 5 points. Alright, so now we have 150 points of disadvantages, which we were allowed to take, and we have a nice, rounded out, superhero type goody-goody character. The unluck comes in that you see this celebrity, people are always hanging around, and he has to protect them. He has to save them when they're trying to video the Olympian at his, best. Just clear out. Oh man, but I'm getting good video, right? This type of thing goes on. So he's unlucky in that things just don't go quite right all the time, because people stay in the way and things like that. All right. So there's the Olympian's disadvantages. And now I'm going to give him a few skills. I like the idea that he has deduction just like his alter ego. So we're going to put that on there. We like the idea that he knows his way around the city, so we're going to give him his a knowledge skill of his base city. So he knows his way around town. We're also going to give him the other knowledge skills that his other form has. So he's aware of the mystical world, the magic world, and he's aware of the Olympian deities. And let's see, and he knows the same languages that his alternate form knows. So basic, fluent, not completely fluent, fluent conversation, literate in modern Greek. And again, I'll point out, you see that this game system has a whole bunch of languages that you can sit there and do. And then we'll make a note of his native language, which is English. Oops, went too far, and then I went back too far. And English. Bam. Okay. Let's see. We're going to make him oratory. He knows how to speak in front of a crowd. And we're going to share martial arts with his other side, his other form. So we're going to have a martial strike that we put on the other form. We're going to have a martial grab. And we're going to have a martial throw. Basically, these are skills that I have on the other form, on the Jimmy form. I will switch to that file and show you. On his martial arts, he has these martial arts. I'm not naming them in the Olympian, but you would certainly want to go do that. And we're also going to give him the same +2 damage classes. Alright, and that is that. So now we're ready to do the Olympian's powers. I think we're ready to do that. Let me check. Yep. Alright. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to add some characteristics. Now I could come over here and do that in this tab, in the characteristics tab. But since they are his powers, let's keep them in the powers tab. So the first thing is I'm going to give him a total of 50 strength. So that's plus 37 strength. And bam. And so now we come over here to the characteristics. Wait, it's still saying 13. But it's under the total over here. It shows his 50 strength, which gives him a 19 or less roll on any strength roll he needs, and a 10 die 6 punch, which with his martial arts becomes 14 die 6 for a normal strike. He has 70 strength to hold on to a grab if he gets hold of you. And if he does the offensive strike, the sidekick, man, 16 die 6 damage. That means throw 16 six-sided dice, add them all up, and that's how much stun he just did to you when he punches you. So, or he sidekicks you. So, 50 strength is adequate, to say the least. We're going to make him a little more agile than Jimmy is. So we're going to add some dex this way. Plus 11. Alright. And we're going to make him tougher. Give him more constitution. So we'll put 17 points on that. And we'll go back and look at the totals again in just a second. After I run through all of this. We're going to make him a little healthier, a little hardier, a little more hale and whole, so we're going to give him 10 more body. We're going to give him 10 more presence. Because when a big, tall, buff Greek fellow tells you, freeze, miscreant, you're going to have a tendency to go, what? Okay. Whatever you say, dude. And so that's where presence and a presence attack comes in. We're going to add 10 PD. And 7, I think it is. Oh, 14 ED. And again, I'll show you why in just a second, these numbers. And we're going to add 1 point of speed. Alright, and that's all the characteristics we're going to bump up. So we're going to come over here and look. Strength again is 50. Dexterity total is now 24, 30 for the constitution, 20 for the body, 25 for intelligence, 25 for ego, 25 presence, which gives him a 5d6 presence attack. How a presence attack works is you deliver your soliloquy or you do your actions beforehand, because there can be bonus dice for that, and you throw that number of dice and you add up the total. And if the total of the dice is greater than the target's presence or ego, whichever is higher for them, you can have some effect. So keep that in mind. Alright. And comeliness is the same, but now his total PD and ED are both 22. That's why I added different amounts to them, because if you notice, his strength is 50, but his con is only 30. So I kind of wanted to balance him out. So he's got 22 PD, 22 ED. Notice there's no resistance. So a gun, a bullet, would kill him at the moment just as easily as it would you or I. But we're going to fix that. His total speed is 5. So you see over here he gets 5 actions on those 12-second turns. Each turn is 12 seconds long, divided up into 12 segments. And your speed gives you a number of phases, actions that you can enact in that turn. So he will act on phase, or segment 3, 5, 8, 10, and 12. because he's got a total speed of 5 now. Recovery is 17. Recovery, it works that you get your recovery stat back at the end of the turn in both stun and endurance. So the higher it is, the better off you are. So, and then 64 endurance, which is the energy you have to power your powers, your punch, your strength, what have you. And 63 stun. We'll probably bump those up a little bit simply because I like, nice round numbers, but we'll see when we get finished with this. Alright, so coming back to powers, we've got some more that I want to put on. Those are the characteristics, though. And this is a pretty simple, straightforward build. I'm not trying to get too fancy with the Olympian here. Otherwise, we could put on some modifiers to these that would reduce their costs a little bit. But for the moment, let's just run with this. Alright. The next thing, we want him to be at least somewhat bulletproof. So we're going to add 12 resistant ED and ED. And now, what that means is that if he's struck with a killing attack, instead of no PD or no ED, he now has 12 out of his 22 that can resist killing attacks like a bullet. In the game system, a 44 Magnum has a 2d6 killing attack. So this guy now will bounce the effect of most bullets, which is kind of where you want a superhero to be, correct? All right. I also gave him some healing in the form of regeneration. So can heal limbs. Okay. Standard effect. 2d6. And I'll explain what all these things mean in just a moment. Okay. Reduce the endurance. We're adding some modifiers here. Even healing and regeneration normally takes energy, takes endurance. So I'm making it where this time it does not. And I'm going to add extra time that he only gets this regeneration post segment 12. So like his other recovery. And so bam, for 16 points, he can heal 2 body back every turn, every 12 seconds. So that's a nice little nifty power to give your superhero, right? And he can even, if his arm gets lopped off, he can even heal that back. Alright, I gave him some leaping for getting around. An additional 10 inches. This is game inches. 1 game inch equals 2 meters in actual space. So bottom line, I just gave him an additional 12 inches of leaping. Oh yes, I did something else to it too. Down here, I gave it a ×4 non-combat multiple. Alright. Oh, and accurate. What do these things mean? I'll start with accurate. I'll also bring up the definition on screen. This adder represents a character whose leaping is always accurate. The character need not make an attack roll to land in his target hex. Normally when you jump, especially with superhuman levels of leaping, you have to make an attack roll to hit the hex to land where you wanted to land. Otherwise, you can shift around a hex or so, an inch or so, 2 meters, so you don't miss you can miss your targeted location you wanted to leap to. With accurate, you don't have to make that attack roll. You land where you wanted to land. The ×4 non-combat comes in. Normally, this 10 inches here is combat movement, which sounds pretty crazy for leaping, that you leap and you can still dodge and pay attention and you're not losing your defensive combat value, your DCV, when you move. But you can go into non-combat speeds, which normally would double this to 20 inches of leaping. But your DCV, your defensive combat value, is halved. So you're easier to target, you're easier to hit. But you always have the option of that non-combat level of movement. What this ×4 does is it changes that non-combat multiple from 2 to 4. So out of combat, Or in combat, if he really wants to take the risk, he can actually leap up to 40 inches. So the guy can leap a pretty good 80 meters in at total if he wants to. All right, and finally, I gave him some more running, another movement power. Come on. I gave him 4 more inches of running, bringing that up to 10 total inches of running, so 20 meters. And I also put the times 4 combat multiple on it. Now, what this means is he has 5 actions he can do. So, if he just decides to run at combat level speeds, he can in 12 seconds run, let's see, what is it? Uh, 20 meters times 5, 100 meters. So 100 meters in 12 seconds. That's pretty much the length of a football field in 12 seconds. All right? So he can book it. And that times 4, if he goes into non-combat speeds, you multiply that by 4, all of a sudden it's 400 meters. So, yeah, the guy is fast. He's got the speed of Hermes. He's the Olympian. Uh-oh. That put me over by 1 point. So somewhere along the lines, I made a 1 point difference from my notes. Mwahaha. Oh, well, I won't worry about it right now. I can do it fairly easily by doing that, taking off 1 point of resistant defense to each. And now you see our point totals match, 350 with 350. Okay? So, I have now made the Olympian, the second form. I will save the character as the Olympian. And now I have both forms completed for this character. I can come back here to Jimmy, though, the normal form, and under the multiform power, I can edit it to associate a file, and I can associate the 2 characters now. Bam. And so now I know when I print this character off that I need to go call up the Olympian and print him off too. And so that's how multiform works. And the bottom line is it is again the power you use when you have a character that has 2 or more distinct forms from each other. Again, I will point out how distinct they can be. Jimmy over here has all these nice skills, but the Olympian only has that list for skills. Well, how can that be? If it doesn't make logical sense to you, then you have to figure out a way of baking in the points. The bottom line is each of these forms is a character in and of itself, and you can only have one of them active at a time. So it's 2 forms, 2 bodies, 2 minds that share the same physical shell, if you will. So again, it's like Bruce Banner and the Hulk. It's like Billy Batson and Shazam. It's Dinosaur Boy, who can assume the forms of a T-Rex, a Brontosaurus, which didn't exist, but you get my point, and a Pteranodon. So, if you want to be like the character Beast Boy, who can shape change into any animal form, then that is a different power altogether. That is, let's see, where is it? I'm in skills and not powers. Is shapeshift. Okay? And then you would do something like have a variable power pool, one of these power frameworks over here, which I will do another episode probably on each one of those at some point. But there's this nice variable power pool that you can set up to mimic the powers that the animal form you take on has. So if you could just assume any shape, that's the power you want, not multiform. Multiform, a lot of people also think that it gives you two forms, that Jimmy Smith and the Olympian could be seen side by side. They cannot. You can be one or the other at any one time. If you were Dinosaur Boy, you could be the normal human or any one of the dinosaur forms at one time, but you could not have all of them out in the open. So this is, yeah, this is multiform, and it gives people no end of headache, because there are some other complications I'm not getting into in it, because they rarely come up. Um, you can adjust, for instance, the base points that the character contains. I could have, for instance, made Jimmy Smith with fewer base points, but then given the Olympian the higher number of base points, so that I didn't have to do all this juggling of making Jimmy Smith a 295 point normal. Most normal humans, by the way, are 50 point characters. So, Jimmy here is pretty superheroic himself. I just got around it by giving him all these nice contacts and a good list of skills. So, these are things to keep in mind with the multiform power. It is a nice power. It is definitely has its place in a superheroic setting. But generally speaking, I've not seen it come up too much. A lot of GMs shy away from it. And I can kind of understand that. A lot of players shy away from it because it is multiple character sheets that you have to keep up with. And you have to keep up with which form am I in right now, and so forth. And the GM has to keep up with that. So I can definitely see why people tend to shy away from it when there are other ways of doing it. Like the Hulk, I could also see you. We'll maybe handle that on another video. I think I'll let this one go. It's gone pretty well. I've been a little shaky on consulting my notes, but at least I had them this time and got through it a little steadier. But I see I have one viewer. I'm not sure who it is. If you've got any questions, give them a shout out. If you don't, I'm going to call it a night and get prepared for probably my next one, which will probably involve one of these power frameworks next time, or a different genre. Like I'm also tossing around maybe bringing up how you make a Western character with Hero System. But we will see. So questions, comments, or dirty looks. If there's not, and you're watching this on some type of on-demand stream instead of the live stream, feel free to comment. I welcome and enjoy commenting and working things out in the system with you. To me, it's probably the greatest RPG system, simply due to its versatility, its ability to do anything you want. If you can imagine it, there's some way you could probably do it in this system. So, that said, this has been a superhero character using multiform, and essentially it's building two or more characters. Alright, so I'm giggling and making a fool out of myself. I'm going to close out these two files now. And if there's nothing else coming in, I will bid you all good night, wherever you may be. And look forward to seeing you again on my next stream. Peace.